Hello and welcome to the debate. I'm your host Sana Maqbool with you at PTV WORLD. In today's show, we will be talking about the OIC Foreign Ministers meeting that is scheduled to be held in Pakistan on the 22nd and the 23rd of March. This is, of course, a major event for Pakistan. It is going to be the 48th session of the Council of Foreign Ministers to be held in Pakistan. And this, of course, is a grand and important event that Pakistan is hosting. A lot of issues are going to be under discussion with regards to regional security and, of course, issues pertaining to the Muslim countries as well. Also under discussion will be issues such as Islamophobia, Kashmir and the situation in Afghanistan. A lot of these discussions are hopefully going to entail something which is going to be beneficial for these issues and of course the people who are suffering at the moment due to these circumstances as well. We will also be taking a look at what else is going to come out from this OIC meeting with regards to a number of resolutions that will also be tabled and agreed upon, and we'll see what is going to be the aftermath of this meeting. We'll explore in further detail the kind of discussions that are expected to be held and the impact that this meeting is going to have both on Pakistan's position in international politics and then of course the OIC as a general platform where different issues are going to be discussed and whether or not real action can be taken in that regard. For this, we have with us in the studios as always Farrukh Pitafi and Raja Faisal, and we'll be joined online by Sami Hamdi, who's an Arab journalist, and also Mr. Javed Hussain, who's a former ambassador. Thank you very much, everyone, for joining us in the debate today. When we talk about the OIC's 48th session of the Council of Foreign Ministers, this, of course, is a major event, Faisal, and we understand that Pakistan, of course, is hosting this, and so it is undertaking this very important initiative. What do you hope to come out of it?
Sana, yet again, it will be very important. The OIC summit, what we saw in the previous one, which was held in Islamabad, it gave a sort of, extra edge to whatever was happening in Afghanistan, and Pakistan wanted to obviously highlight that the problems which are being faced in Afghanistan, that will, of course, eventually affect Pakistan as well. But now this one is, a bit different to it, 48th of its session. If we look at the current situation, of course, Pakistan, especially Prime Minister of Pakistan, he struggled for a resolution to be passed in United Nations that was related to Islamophobia, and that is a success and it will be highlighted in it. And of course Kashmir, whatever is happening in Kashmir post abrogation of 370 and 35A by the India, it will be highlighted. Plus elsewhere in the world, wherever Muslims are suffering, that will be highlighted, and it is being considered and termed as a very important summit, because this will be a turning point for the Muslims elsewhere, and especially owing to the fact that is a resolution on Islamophobia, against Islamophobia, is passed by United Nations.
Right, and of course, Faisal, all of this also depends upon what really is going to be discussed and what sort of angles are going to be undertaken, and then of course whether or not the countries that are participating in this meeting will actually agree on the number of issues that are going to be discussed. Farrukh, when we look at all of these issues, we've seen previous OIC meetings as well, and we've seen the outcomes as well. Can we hope for something more tangible and different in terms of the very important issues that we are of course discussing, but we need to move towards action as well?
Right, you're absolutely right, Sana. Last time there was this meeting, if you remember, this was the point we kept on stressing. And if you remember, during that meeting that took place in Islamabad, it is not a summit, by the way, because summits usually are supposed to be the leaders of the countries, right? These are foreign ministers and they are going to meet. But the previous meeting that was held in Islamabad actually came up with a mechanism or a fund to actually be raised for Afghanistan. So we are going to see some kind of progress in that context as well. We are going to see how many countries are going to put together the fund for the upkeep of the Afghan people. Then there is the issue of Yemen that continues to drag on for quite some time. And finally, of course, as was pointed out, Kashmir is quite a very important issue, and Palestine as well. So we are going to see a lot of discussion And then we have to wait and see whether there is going to be any steps that are going to be concrete, that are tangible, particularly regarding Islamophobia. 2 billion Muslims around the world need to be represented. And if their foreign ministers are not going to do it, angels are not going to come from the sky. At this moment, it is important to remember that Islamophobia as a term has been used a lot. The UN could do what it has done already. It is up to the OIC and especially their foreign officers to take care of the mechanisms to ensure that Islamophobia doesn't spread and it is confronted the way it is, and to ensure that Muslims all over the world are not targeted.
Right, and this is of course going to be one of the biggest challenges, of course, as this council session is going to be undertaken. We've also been joined online by Sami Hamdi, who's an Arab journalist. Welcome to the debate, Sami, and thank you for joining us. Of course, we've seen that the 48th session of the Council of Foreign Ministers of the OIC countries is going to be held tomorrow and day after. We understand this is going to be a very important event, and when we look at this this particular session that is going to be held on the 22nd and 23rd, we also understand that a lot of it is at stake as well. The issues that we've been highlighting in terms of the situation in Afghanistan, the situation in Kashmir, and Islamophobia are grave and large concerns of many of the Muslim countries as well. What really do you think needs to be done within this session, which is perhaps more than just a discussion, for things to go forward?
I think first and foremost, first of all, thank you for having me, Sana. Thank you to PTV World for having me. I think first and foremost, it's important to stress that from the Muslim world's perspective, Imran Khan appears to have breathed new life into the OIC. Whereas before it was considered to be a dying organization with no real relevance, Imran Khan alone has really dragged the OIC into a force that people are beginning to take or retake note of, particularly when it comes to issues relating to Islamophobia and this real bid on the part of Imran Khan, which appears to be pursued with raw conviction, this idea that the Muslim world or the Muslim countries need to start taking united stance on key issues or risk essentially being left behind. And this is why I think that Imran Khan, the success of establishing an Islamophobia Day, 15th of March, on the part of the UN, while some may believe that this is not significant, it's important to stress that this is the result of Imran Khan dragging the OIC, dragging the Muslim countries along to secure these small victories, which are essentially establishing a landing board or a jumping board from which the Muslim community can really genuinely begin to make their voices heard in an environment in which Islamophobia is becoming rife. It's also important to highlight that Imran Khan specifically, as the Prime Minister of Pakistan, has really restored Pakistan's reputation amongst the OIC countries and indeed in the Muslim world as a very real Muslim power. The reality is that when Imran Khan is sitting in Islamabad and he's watching warming ties between the UAE and India, between Saudi Arabia and India, between other Muslim countries and India, Imran Khan has been using the OIC, albeit not explicitly, but certainly implicitly, to essentially embarrass some of these Muslim countries that are expected to take firm stances alongside their Muslim brothers in Kashmir, in Palestine, and in other particular issues. In other words, Imran Khan's presence, his utilization of the OIC, his utilization of an organization that was perceived in the Muslim world as becoming defunct, Imran Khan has breathed new life by using these processes, by using the media attention on the OIC, by garnering media attention through his speeches, through his public standing up against issues such as Islamophobia. Imran Khan has made the Muslim world now take note of the OIC in a manner they were not necessarily taking note of in the past decade. And this is why, in terms of going forward, it's not that there will be any real resolutions between the foreign ministers, but rather what Imran Khan has successfully managed to do is force the Muslim nations or force their foreign ministers to begin to start at least taking some of these issues seriously. Whereas before they were paying lip service, now we have the Muslim foreign ministers scrambling to find some sort of presentation in which they appear like they are doing something as opposed to just paying those particular lip service. And this is why I think that I start with this point, in that, and I finish on this point before handing over. It's important to stress that the significance of these OIC meetings over the past year or past 2 years in pushing Islamophobia is uniquely a result of Imran Khan pushing the agenda of the OIC and dragging the OIC, not necessarily the result of any established unity. And I think Imran Khan, albeit very slowly, genuinely believes that if he continues on this course, he will be able to secure two very important things: a united resolution on Kashmir, a united resolution on Palestine, two issues on which there are significant differences, tragically, between the Muslim countries.
All right. Thank you very much, Mr. Sami, for pointing out those issues, and we'll be talking about them in further detail as well. Let me also welcome in the debate Mr. Javed Hussain, who's former ambassador. Mr. Javed, can you hear me?
Yes, I can.
All right. Earlier we were discussing the impact and significance that this OIC Council session is going to have in terms of the impact on the different issues that are going to be discussed. And you can give your general input on that as well. But we also want to be able to focus on Islamophobia at the moment after what Sami has highlighted in terms of Prime Minister Imran Khan's efforts towards achieving that. We understand a resolution has been also passed, has been adopted in the UN General Assembly with Islamophobia the day on the March 15th. To be adopted as the Day Against Islamophobia. And it's great for this discussion to move forward. And a lot of the efforts that Sami has been highlighting have been there with regards to Prime Minister Imran Khan's efforts. However, a lot of what needs to be done still remains. And perhaps the OIC's platform is what is essential to take it forward from here onwards. Do you think that the OIC countries are prepared to do that?
Hello, I couldn't hear the last sentence that you can you please repeat what you said?
Yes, Ambassador Saab, I was saying that are the OIC countries prepared to take forward the case of Islamophobia? We understand that Prime Minister Imran Khan has brought it to the level where it is, but a lot that needs to be done with regards to how to combat Islamophobia is also requiring the support and efforts of the OIC countries. Are they prepared to do that?
Yes, I think considering the fact that the resolution on Islamophobia was adopted by the UN General Assembly by consensus with the support of all the Muslim countries. In fact, the resolution was tabled by Pakistan on behalf of OIC, shows that the Muslim countries are united in projecting and putting forward their case on the issue of Islamophobia, which basically means that there should be religious freedom throughout the world, and the interests of the Muslims and Islam should be safeguarded by different countries and by different organizations. So I think this was a great achievement on the part of the OIC, in which Pakistan played a very prominent role. But so I have no doubt that going ahead, OIC will be very active in this field. They will have to formulate their strategy. Passing one resolution is not enough. I think we need to do much more to ensure that we react constructively, positively, and in an active manner.
Right, and Ambassador Saab, it will be also essential for the countries to be able to agree upon what really constitutes Islamophobia, what sort of actions need to be taken as a consequence of those who violate or discriminate against Muslims. And perhaps that sort of an agreement coming in from different countries who are part of the OIC, do you think that is something that can be achieved, or is it an ambitious goal?
No, I'm sure the forthcoming OIC Council of Foreign Ministers meeting will be able to make a headway toward reaching that goal, because this will be one of the important agenda items on the before the foreign ministers of these all the Muslim countries. But I think we should, while keeping our focus on the issue of Islamophobia, we should not forget that there are other issues also that the Council will be dealing, and that will include Palestine.
This is where I actually wanted to bring the discussion. As we progress in the program, we are going to focus also on Islamophobia, but because you are with us and you are a career diplomat, you have been part of Pakistan's Foreign Office, let me ask you about the scope of CFM. OIC CFM, and what exactly to expect from the whole event. Is it merely going to be Islamophobia? Is it going to be Kashmir? We know that a delegation from Kashmir is also coming. So what exactly can we actually achieve out of this, sir?
The Organization of Islamic Cooperation deals with political, economic, cultural issues. There are, for instance, 3 standing committees on which will present their reports to the Council of Foreign Ministers. There will be COMSTEC, which is headed by the President of Pakistan, that deals with scientific and technological and technical cooperation among the Islamic countries. Then there is COMSEC, which is headed by the President of Turkey, and they will be giving their report on economic and commercial cooperation. Then there is COMIAC, which deals with information and cultural issues and headed by the President of Senegal. And then, of course, there is Al-Quds Committee, which is headed by the King of Morocco. So all these committees will present their reports, and there will be draft resolutions on related issues. In addition, there will be meetings of contact group on Kashmir, which always holds meetings when the meeting of the Council of Foreign Ministers takes place. And this contact group consists of Azerbaijan, Turkey, Senegal, Saudi Arabia, and Pakistan, and its meetings are presided over by the Secretary General of the OIC. So Palestine, of course, will be another important issue, which will be on the prominent on the agenda. We have to keep in mind that basically OIC is the collective voice of the Islamic Ummah, and it is supposed to cover and deal with each and all issues that collectively are important from the point of view of the Muslim countries. So Islamophobia, of course, will be one issue, but in addition, there will be other important issues. For instance, peace in Afghanistan, peace and stability in Afghanistan, peace and stability in the Middle East, these are two very important issues which are confronting the Muslim world, and now it will depend upon the sagacity and on the wisdom of the leaders who will gather at Islamabad, how they come to grips with these important issues. Peace in Afghanistan and peace in Middle East are key to, I think, peace in the Islamic world, and they will
Sami, peace in Afghanistan and stability in Afghanistan. If we look at the theme of this meeting, it says building partnership for unity, justice, and development. When we talk about development, of course, we know that Afghanistan is a war-torn country right now, and it is trying to stabilize itself. Do you think that OIC session would discuss about the development projects, introduced in Afghanistan, so that it can create sort of jobs for jobless people within Afghanistan, and some sort of stability can come to Afghanistan?
And can we also get an update on the fund that was created for Afghanistan last time? Sami.
I think first and foremost, with regards to Afghanistan and indeed the OIC approach to Afghanistan, I think that we should talk about it in realpolitik terms as opposed to the actual processes of the OIC, because the reality is that Imran Khan specifically has spent a lot of effort trying to convince the Muslim nations that it doesn't matter what the US thinks about Afghanistan. It is the duty of the Muslim nations to come together with their own program, with their own agenda towards Afghanistan in order to rescue the Afghan people, and that the Afghan people should not be punished as a result of a group of individuals, or indeed should not be caught up in this big superpower game. And the reality is that Imran Khan has shown a remarkable patience with this, primarily because if you're in Imran Khan's position, and let's be brutally honest, when you're speaking to Saudi Arabia, UAE, Qatar, and these other countries, you're very much aware that none of these countries want to come near Afghanistan, provided that Biden is not clear over what he wants to do with Afghanistan. They're very wary that any policies they take towards Afghanistan might affect their relationship towards the US. And this is what has frustrated Islamabad. This is what has frustrated Imran Khan, primarily because Imran Khan believes that if the Muslim nations get together and unite, they are able to help Afghanistan in a matter that, one, helps to ensure that the Taliban don't transgress or don't overreach, and two, actually help the Afghan people. And this is why I started my first answer with emphasizing the role of Imran Khan in this, in that Imran Khan is trying to assert Muslim agency. He's trying to assert that an agency does exist outside the current superpowers, which is this OIC, which is these Muslim countries, that they're capable of doing something. The issue with this OIC, when you're asking about Afghanistan, is that realistically, there is not much that Imran Khan can do. He might be able to convince some countries to put up some funds, or he might convince some countries to take tentative steps towards Afghanistan. But I think what's more important for Imran Khan at the moment is to try to present his vision to the OIC that there is a way to help Afghanistan without compromising the national interests of these individual Muslim countries. That's the tragedy, but it's also something that I think that Imran Khan specifically as a personality is very well equipped.
All right. And Sami, this is exactly what we were talking about earlier as well. When Mr. Javed, you spoke about the collective action for the Muslim Ummah, and even when Sami is talking about Muslim agency, we understand that perhaps that is what the purpose has been for the OIC, to be able to fulfill that and to be able to play a role wherever there are Muslim concerns. But again, it also is part of different countries. It constitutes different countries who have their own interests, who have their own foreign policies, who have their own relations with different countries, and a lot of that sort of comes into play. Ambassador Saab, when we talk about this issue, which one do you think will take precedence in terms of whatever is given more priority? Of course, there are countries that have their own relations with perhaps countries like India, countries like US, and a lot of the issues that we're currently discussing will involve their individual relations with these countries as well. So will the OIC as a platform or as a collective body be able to take priority in terms of its actions, or will the individual countries prioritize themselves and their vested interests?
Well, when an organization of 57 countries sits together and try to reach a common understanding on common position on important issues, inevitably there will be different points of view. And that is how these organizations operate. They will have to then find a common denominator, which will be normally at the very lower level. So they have to find the lowest common denominator. In case of Afghanistan, I can see that there cannot be any difference of opinion on strengthening of peace and stability in Afghanistan, for which the current rulers in Afghanistan, that is the Taliban, will have to play a role, and other parties in Afghanistan will have to play a role. Second is humanitarian assistance to Afghanistan. There can't be much difference of opinion on that issue. I'm sure Muslim countries can try at least to pool their resources for helping the poor people of Afghanistan. The third is development and economic progress of Afghanistan, which is a longer term issue, and that there also the Afghan people and the Afghan government or the Afghan authorities headed by Taliban currently, they need some assistance from the OIC countries. And these are three issues or three aspects on which it should not be impossible for the Islamic countries or Muslim countries to reach some understanding. As far as equally, I think, complicated is the situation in the Middle East. For instance, the differences between Iran and Saudi Arabia, the issue of Palestine. We cannot forget or ignore those issues also, because Middle East is at the heart of the Muslim world, and whatever happens there affects all of us, all the other Muslim countries. So there should be efforts should be made to promote understanding, harmony, and cooperation, if possible, between Iran on the one hand and its allies on Iran and its allies on the one hand, and on some of the Arab countries, so that there is some progress towards the restoration of peace in the Middle East. That is also, from my point of view, it will not be an easy thing to do, because we all know
I hope,
how deeply.
Ambassador Sahab, you can hear me as well. I know that Yemen is also a very important issue, but given that at this moment a war is raging in Europe, and because of that perhaps food security of the world might be risked as well, it takes me back to the trust fund that OIC actually had established back in December. Now when we actually look it up, we see that Nigeria might have actually contributed to the fund, but I haven't seen any other example of countries that might have actually provided any kind of aid to this fund for Afghanistan. Do we have any clarity on how much money has been actually collected for Afghanistan so far? Because it had to focus on food security. On the other side, it had to actually focus on the stabilization of banking channels in Afghanistan as well, which seems to be sinking further into poverty as we speak, sir.
I think you are absolutely right that there is not much progress has been made in these areas, despite the understanding which has arrived at a few months ago. And that is why this meeting of the Council of Foreign Ministers needs to play an important role, need to focus on these issues, need to find out where the difficulties are, where the obstacles are, why the Muslim countries have not been able to make as much headway or progress in helping the people of Afghanistan through humanitarian assistance. Obviously, this means making available some resources, and not all countries are, frankly speaking, in a position to offer substantial program. There are substantial assistance to the people or authorities of Afghanistan for humanitarian, in terms of humanitarian assistance, but there are some in the Middle East and elsewhere which are in a position to, especially in a position to help, and they should come forward and offer their or make their donations for this purpose. Historically, if you look at the history of OIC, unfortunately, Muslim countries, while they have been adopting very effective, not effective, but detailed resolutions on different issues, but when it comes actually to making monetary contributions and donations and making available resources, they have been very, very lethargic, and they have not actually been active on that field. So I'm not surprised that in the case of Afghanistan, also having adopted the declarations earlier, they have not provided as much resources for helping the people of Afghanistan as they should have. And this is hopefully this meeting of the Council of Foreign Ministers, now that some more time has passed, will perhaps enable our leaders who are going to meet at Islamabad to come to some effective decisions and take effective action for providing humanitarian assistance to people of Afghanistan, which is more very urgent. But I think that has to go along with some kind of action by the Taliban themselves to strengthen and stabilize political stability in Afghanistan. The two things will have to go together.
All right.
Yeah, Sami, I'll come towards you once again. You know, when we talk about building partnership for justice, we very well know that very recently a case was solved in south of India, and that was related to banning the hijab in the schools and colleges. And do you not think that Islamophobia is at its peak in today's Hindutva regime of India? And right now, there are millions of Indians who are working within Middle East, Gulf states, and of course they are earning their living from there. Shouldn't there be sort of sanctions on India related to that? And this session would be coming up for that?
I think what I'm about to say may be heartbreaking for some people to hear, but this is the tragedy of the reality that we live in, which is that first and foremost, it's important to remember that when French President Macron defended those horrible cartoons that depicted our beloved Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam in a very vulgar manner, the reality is we had some OIC countries that came out and said that Macron has every right to defend these cartoons and defend French security. And they gave out official statements that tentatively condemned the cartoons, but in reality, they encouraged Macron to continue with his crackdown on Muslims under the context of fighting extremism. We saw the last time that Israel bombarded Gaza that we saw some of the OIC countries, some of the most prominent OIC countries deployed their media in favor of Israel against the Palestinians. And likewise today, what we're seeing with regards to India is that some of these OIC countries are saying that Kashmir has nothing to do with me. Let me boost my ties with India. It's important. They've even described it as some sort of Abrahamic alliance between Israel, India, and some of the Middle East states. And when we see with this hijab ban that has taken place, the courts which was supposed to protect Indian citizens from this regime that is becoming increasingly tyrannical and increasingly Islamophobic, we're seeing a sort of muted response. And this is why I think that when we're looking at the OIC meeting that is taking place, we must look at it within the context that it is taking place. Imran Khan dragged the OIC into pushing the UN to establish this resolution. He is dragging the OIC into coming together to produce a resolution, a statement on Kashmir. He is dragging the OIC into producing a statement on Afghanistan. There is this real sense that the reality is that this remains a broken organization, that Pakistan now under Imran Khan is really trying to mobilize and activate in favor of the Muslim world. And this is why when it comes to Islamophobia, I know that the sentiment is Islamophobia, there are more important issues. But it's important to stress that Imran Khan has identified an issue through Islamophobia which enables him to restore the structures of the OIC and enables him to channel once more the anger of the Muslim community into something that can actually produce something tangible.
And
And this is
Sami,
the final
this is
point
a
I'll
good
make.
point. Let me just seek a little bit of clarification. You said that India is now part of the Abrahamic alliance. India's dominant faith is not part of Abrahamic faiths. So how do you actually figure that out? And secondly, regarding the case of people of these Arab countries and Muslim countries, regardless of where their governments are at, these countries have some of the very rich and well endowed, influential people. Can't they actually come to the rescue of their own Muslim brethren by making significant donations on their own?
And especially when we know that Middle Eastern countries, people of Middle Eastern countries, they stopped buying products of France in past. Will they do it for not buying products of India?
I think that first and foremost, I think the alliance is the Indo-Abrahamic alliance that's being termed by the think tanks in the US. They're describing this alliance that is emerging between the UAE, India, and Israel, first and foremost. The second point that's worth noting is that
but
there is a
Abraham has
sensitivity
nothing to do with Hinduism.
It's true.
I hope you get that point, right?
And this is what emphasizes, but this is what emphasizes the point in that Kashmir and these other issues are not being considered as major issues with regards to some of these OIC countries, that they're willing to turn a blind eye to it in favor of greater ties with India. And this is why when we see the ban on hijab, we've seen a muted response from these countries. The second point that's worth noting is this, that as Imran Khan pushes the OIC, as he forces with his Islamic rhetoric, the way that he's put Pakistan now back on the map, the way that, and I'm speaking this as an outside, as a Muslim outside of Pakistan, the way he's made Pakistan more popular than I can ever remember it being, where Muslims now for the first time I see them genuinely considering going to Pakistan for their holidays and really searching for tour packages and the like to go to Pakistan. And that's as a result of Imran Khan's persona, his Islamic rhetoric. There is a sensitivity amongst some of these OIC countries.
And
if we give Imran
of
Khan
course,
too
all of
much,
that has
if
been
we
there
give
and it's
Imran
important.
Khan
But
too
like
much-
you said, Sami, the issue of Kashmir still remains. And there's a lot of it which is still at stake with regards to countries also part of the OIC. And then, of course, in general as well. Ambassador Saab, something that we were also earlier discussing, but then Kashmir issue is another one which is going to be under discussion as part of this session as well. And again, we understand that so many decades have gone by and there have been discussions on this issue on different platforms, not just the OIC as well. Is there a difference in the way it's going to be taken now on board, even by the OIC countries, when their understanding of the issue perhaps, or their relationship with India for that matter, is on a different page? How are we going to get all of them together to actually produce a stance or even any sort of an effort to relieve the people of Kashmir of their suffering?
And Ambassador Saab, Sami keeps on talking about popular stance, and I'm all for popular and popular stance, but with due respect, we need some kind of concrete results as well. Are we going to see any at all, sir?
Well, can I start?
Yes, sir, please.
As far as Kashmir is concerned, Kashmir has been on the agenda of the OIC for about 3 decades. And at every Council of Foreign Ministers meeting, OIC Foreign Ministers meeting, resolutions are adopted on Kashmir which call for, respect for the human rights of the Kashmiri people, for the exercise of their right of self-determination, for implementation of UN Security Council resolutions. But unfortunately, India has obstructed all those resolutions from their implementation. There is also, as I mentioned earlier, an OIC contact group on Kashmir consisting of 5 countries, including Pakistan and a few others like Saudi Arabia, Turkey, Niger, and Azerbaijan. It is chaired by the OIC Secretary General. I'm sure they will have another meeting of OIC contact group on Kashmir, which will produce its own declaration for consideration by the Council of Foreign Ministers meeting. Now, these are, frankly speaking, are not going to change the basic problem that we are facing, which is that India has been intransigent, has been adamant in opposing the exercise of the right of self-determination of the Kashmiri people. But that should not at the same time discourage us from continuing with our diplomatic efforts bilaterally, internationally, at different international forums, especially at OIC, to highlight the plight of the Kashmiri people who are being subjected to untold atrocities, who are being arrested, are being killed or martyred, and their women are being dishonored, and their children are being killed, and they are under virtually a state of siege. So we have to highlight, we have to continue to highlight their condition. We have to continue to emphasize the need for allowing the people of Kashmir to exercise their
Right, and
right of
Ambassador Saab, I
self-determination.
understand that, but it
This
all
is
boils down to what you spoke about earlier with regards to the lowest common denominator, which of course
I
is
was
present
to
in
say
part of such
that
organizations as well. But if the lowest common denominator is really that low, is it really going to make a difference, or does it actually become redundant? And if it is the case, then how do we actually increase the lowest common denominator? Because at the end of the day, a higher purpose of the OIC is also to enhance unity among the Muslim countries as well. So it's also about increasing that denominator. Are there efforts in place for that, and how can we do that?
as far as Kashmir is concerned, you have to simply have a long-term approach to the solution of Kashmir issue. Kashmir issue is not going to be solved tomorrow or the next year, considering the past history of this issue. So you have to have a long-term strategy in which OIC has to play its own role, and we have to do other, and the people of Kashmir have to do their own, play their own role, and the rest of the world has to play its own role. And Pakistan must continue with its efforts in a very well calculated strategy to deal with this issue. And in the long term, there is some hope that ultimately the people of Kashmir, if they continue to agitate for their right of self-determination, and Pakistan continues to support them and is able to mobilize the world public opinion support in their support, we may
Right.
see some success. And one more thing, the ultimate analysis, Pakistan's voice on this issue will be as effective as Pakistan's own strength in political terms,
Absolutely,
in
sir. And
economic
it
terms.
is very important to be grounded in reality and be realistic. But there is something else that is going on in India. We have seen the calls for genocide already. But recently, because we are talking also about Islamophobia, the Indian government has screened a documentary or a movie on Kashmiri Pandits,
Yeah.
and after that we have seen again calls for genocide. So in that view, is there still a possibility that at least OIC's contact group and OIC in general will be able to come up with a statement condemning Islamophobia in India, particularly these calls for genocide, sir?
My own feeling is that yes, they will succeed in adopting a resolution which will condemn inhuman activities of the Indian government, not only in Kashmir but also against the Muslims throughout India. I think there is a widespread understanding that India cannot and should not be allowed to go scot-free with all these atrocities that are being committed to, because ultimately, if the Islamic world keeps quiet and remains silent on these issues, then it will hurt us all and in different corners of the world. So we have to take a very strong position. And my feeling is, that this meeting that is going to take place in Islamabad will make some headway in that direction, and there will be some kind of a resolution or statement which will take the Indian government to task for promoting Hindutva, for suppressing the rights of the Muslim people, for committing atrocities against them, of which we are all aware. So let us see, and whether my
All
Sir,
right,
very,
Sammy.
very quickly.
I just want to quickly ask Sammy one thing, Faisal. When we talk about making headway, that Ambassador Saab was earlier talking about, what will that headway be for you, Sammy? Is it going to be a statement? Is it going to be a resolution? Is it going to be a unified stance on any of these issues that we're earlier discussing? At best, what will this session achieve?
And very quickly, with your permission, Sana, whenever we ask Sami about the role of Muslims, usually we end up talking about political power. But as they say in America, that finance or money is also free speech. And we see a lot of investment coming from Arab countries into India. Is there still a possibility, Sami, that we see some kind of reprimand that these businesses stop dealing with India until the human rights situation in India improves?
True.
With regards to the first question, I think the best case solution is to actually come up with a resolution. And the reason being is that there is a question mark whether a resolution will even be agreed upon with regards to India. Don't forget that Macron has been closing mosques in France. He's been limiting Muslim rights with regards to hijab. He's been forcing imams to sign up to a state charter. And despite all of his crackdown and fierce repression of Muslims, Macron was welcomed with open arms in the UAE and Saudi Arabia a few months ago. There was no desire on the part of these countries to isolate Macron. And this is where the challenge lies with regards to Kashmir and indeed the resolution. With regards to investments that are going towards India, I know that some people think that popularity of Imran Khan or Pakistan doesn't really make much of a difference, but the reality is that it does, primarily because the reality is that while states or political power are trying to pursue ties with India at the expense of Kashmir, the Muslim Ummah or the conscience is now directing its money towards Pakistan, towards Turkey, towards Malaysia, towards these countries that are increasingly vocal with regards to Islamic rhetoric and with regards to Islamic causes. And this is why we should not underestimate nor undermine the success that Pakistan has achieved with regards to its case on Islamophobia.
And nobody is underestimating that, but I am still waiting for one parallel. You keep on bringing up Macron, and I'm all for that. Can you also condemn the way Narendra Modi is welcomed in Arab countries, please?
You've misunderstood me. My point is saying is that when we look at the reaction to Macron, we don't expect a reaction to Modi.
No, but can
Modi
you also
is a
mention
vicious tyrant
Narendra Modi as well, please?
and calling for genocide, who has cracked down on the Muslims, who has violated their rights, who is promoting this idea of genocide towards Muslims. It's a tyranny and it's a disaster, and it's something that is a shame on the Muslim world that they're unable to make a firm stance. The question was with regards to what they will do towards India. I don't think they will do much because they didn't do much towards France, and that suggests they won't do much towards India. But I do think the reality is that when we're looking at the OIC in its own context, the reality is there is progress. We are moving forward. Imran Khan is humiliating the other Muslim powers by insisting on resolutions, by insisting on OIC processes, by being very loud about these
Faisal, I
issues.
believe you had a question.
Yeah, very quickly, Sami, I will request you to also please condemn Narendra Modi and his policies as well. I say this because it is important in this country, everybody is seeing, and we have seen what Indian government is doing right now. Please condemn him as well.
I think anybody listening will see that I've condemned, and I condemn Modi and his promotion of genocide towards Muslims. The point that I am making is, when the question is asked, what will Muslims do? The reality is that Modi's disgusting tyranny of the Muslims, the disgusting support of the lynching of Muslims, the tragedy, and this is why I said what I said is a tragedy. The tragedy is, I do not expect Muslim countries to punish Modi because they did not punish Macron for his repression of the Muslims.
We got that point. Yes, Sami.
Ambassador Javed, we know that, Chinese foreign minister, he's coming to Islamabad as a special guest at OIC. How do you see it, sir? How important it is?
Sorry, can you say it again?
Sir, Chinese foreign minister, he's coming to Islamabad as well to be a special guest at OIC session. How do you see it, sir? How important it is?
Well, this is a very important development and something that we should welcome. China is an emerging great power, and its association and support for OIC should be welcomed by all of us, and especially if this leads to a stronger Chinese support to Islamic causes like Palestine, like Kashmir and Islamophobia and other issues, then this is something that needs to be welcomed, and I am very happy to see this development.
Thank you very much, Mr. Sami and Mr. Javed, for joining us and being a part of the debate and talking to us at length about the OIC and, of course, the 48th session of the Council of Foreign Ministers of the OIC countries that's going to be held on the 22nd and the 23rd of March. Keep watching the debate on PTV World. We will be covering all the events and, of course, the discussions moving forward. And we hope to see something more tangible coming out from the discussion this time around. And that, of course, is the hope. But let's see what actually happens. Thank you so much for joining us at PTV World. Have a nice weekend. See you next week.